Hello everyone, it's Georgia down in Australia and thank you for joining me. Now this is going to be the second project for my September 2023 theme of A Simple Life, and we are going to make a little pot plant, or we're going to plant a little pot plant for our special quiet place or prayer corner, or even in your little corner of your art room, wherever you go to be in that quiet place. Now, I have in the past created a few things with you for that space. If you've been crafting along with me the last few years, you probably have a little, what we called a prayer box, which was an upcycled box that you could put little prayer cards or anything you wanted into. You may have our upcycled glass jar that we put a candle into. I'm sure there's some other things, but today I thought it would be nice to have a little plant in that area. Now, I am starting off with a terracotta pot. You really don't want anything bigger than this. We're not decorating a plant to go on the floor in a large room. This is going to be on your desk or on your bedside table, or in that quiet little sacred place that you go to. So you don't want something that's huge and it's going to take up the whole space. You want something small and discreet. I have already painted the outside with a layer of Mod Podge. Now, my reasoning behind that was that number one, I wanted to have some sort of primer that my paint could cling to, because we are going to paint these, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. We're painting the pots. Okay, so I wanted a kind of a primer, and I also wanted something to kind of waterproof my pot in a sort of way, because I'm thinking, being terracotta, it's going to absorb moisture from my plant, and if the moisture comes out to the outside, I wonder if it's going to affect the painting. So I put this layer on just to protect the paint from the moisture rather than the other way around. I did not prime the inside. I'm leaving the inside as is, and I've just painted the outside with Mod Podge. Now, that is a bit of a contentious issue, apparently. I saw a video on YouTube of a lady who was saying it's a really, really bad idea to Mod Podge your pots because this is what happens. And then she put the pot in a thing of water and I filled it up with water and then showed us this thing that apparently happened. I could not see. I have no idea what she was talking about. But I thought, well, okay, that's fair enough, but I'm not going to be putting my pot in a bowl of water, and I'm not going to be filling it with water. I'm going to plant a little succulent in it, which will be like spray watered once a week. It's not going to be a soggy, wet thing. So I'm painting this as a pot plant, not as an aquarium. So I kind of think Mod Podge is going to be fine. Now, having said that, I'm also going to, and you don't need to do this, but this is just experience has told me after having done this layer that I will save a lot of second coat, third coat, so many of my paints if I actually give my pot a quick whitewash with gesso, because I'm going to use some lighter colors. I'm sort of going for a desert theme, so I'm going to be using yellows and oranges, and I know my yellow is a little bit translucent, so just to give it a bit of help, because the pot is so dark, I'm painting the whole thing white. Now again, you don't have to do this. It's up to you, depending on what you're planning to paint on your pot. You can completely miss this step and you won't know the difference. The previous pots that I made as prototypes for this and for another project that I was working on, I did not gesso them and they were absolutely fine. I just had to do a couple of layers of the paint. So I'm sort of thinking a quick layer of gesso now will save me the usage of too much paint, and my gesso is cheaper than my paint, so that's kind of my thinking. So that's my first step, gessoing the pot, and then I'll have to let it dry really well before I start painting. With the gesso dry, I'm ready to paint my pot. Now, I had to edit out a small piece of the previous part of this video because I said that this was a 9-inch pot, and it's clearly not 9 inches, it is a 9 centimeter pot. So if anybody saw the 9 here, I don't know if it's very visible, but they have 9 and just made in Italy, and some description of the pot actually set in the terracotta there, which is kind of annoying, but that's okay. So this is 9 centimeters across the top. So for our American friends, that's about 3.5 inches. So if you're wondering what size pot this is, especially for the part where I was saying don't really make it much bigger than this. Now there are so many different ways you could paint this, and however you paint it is up to you. I am going to paint a sort of desert themed ombre effect on my pot. So I am grabbing some yellow, some orange, some red, a little bit of white, and a tiny bit of purple. Now again, you don't have to do yours like this. You can paint anything you like on your pot. Any sort of design is fine. I'm just doing this because I like it. And I'm going to start by just painting the bottom part of my pot in orange. Being quite rough about it. I'm not measuring, I'm not making the top of it straight. I'm just giving it a layer of orange along the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's sitting a little bit translucent over the white gesso. This is why I white gessoed, because it's a lot easier to paint over white than if I was painting over the dark brown of the terracotta. I won't need quite as much paint. And while it's still wet, now I'm going to bring in some red. And I'm mixing it into the orange. You could just go plain red if you wanted to. You could go any colour you like, really. But I sort of want that orangey red at the bottom of my pot. I'm going to come in with some more orange, and I'm sort of blending them together. So some of the orange is going down into the red, some of the red's coming up into the orange. So this is kind of my halfway point where the two are blending. I have not cleaned my brush in between so that I've got that colour blending happening. Now I'll clean my brush and I'll do just some orange on its own, starting from the top so that I'm not contaminating it. So I have some very orange happening there. And then as I work my way down, I'll start to pick up some of the colours from the bottom and blend those in a little bit. So I've got the pot sitting over my hand, so I have my hand inside the pot and using that to control the rolling motion. I'm going to grab some yellow and mix some yellow into the top of the orange. I'm doing that quite roughly so that it's sort of blending, but I'm also getting some yellow streaks happening there. Then I'll clean my brush and put some clean yellow along the top. Oops. Now this will definitely need a few layers because it is a very translucent, thin kind of a yellow paint. Even though it is the Dina Wakley heavy body acrylics, the yellow I find tends to be not quite as heavy colour-wise as the other colours in the collection. So I always have to do a few layers of the yellow. I'm not blending that too much right now. Now while that's kind of drying, before I come back to my second layer, I'm going to actually grab a smaller brush and come in with more yellow, just, whoops, blending it along some parts of the orange and red. I'm going to come in with some white, just very lightly. Just paint some white lines through, blend them a little bit. gives it a little bit of motion and a little bit of interest, as I like to say, and keeps it from being just, you know, red, orange, yellow. Oops, that's too much. The beauty of acrylic paints is if when you make a whoops like this, you can always wash it off, paint over it, do something. You can always fix it. It's quite easy to fix. So I'm putting quite a lot of white on this one. The last desert one that I did not have quite so much white. I'm going for a slightly different look here. And because I'm not cleaning my brush, when I move up through the colours, I'm dragging bits of whatever colour I last painted with me. And I'm going to get just the tiniest bit of purple. I'm going to put some streaks of purple through the bottom parts of the pot. Sort of going for that desert shadow, dusk kind of look. As always, nothing I paint is reality. That's not my thing. But sometimes it's just the colours speak the story more than the actual illustrating or pictures or images, if that makes sense. I'm bringing some of the purple up into the top areas of the pot, but I'm making the lines thinner and more widely spaced and lighter with my brush. Okay, now I'll come back with more yellow on that top part. And after I have finished repainting or giving a second layer to the yellow and blending a little bit with the orange beneath it, then I'll let it dry before I go on to my next step. I just want to add a little bit of spattering, now not to the entire pot, just to the bit at the top. So I'm going to make a bit of a very quick mask. I'm wrapping some paper around my pot. I don't think I'm even going to use anything to hold it down. Even though I just want to spatter the top here, I'm leaving this part blank because I do want some of the spatter to sort of bleed onto this area, so it's not just a strip of spatter across the top, but rather something that kind of blends into the whole design. And I'm going to grab some white paint. Water it down. And we all know the spatter song. So I'm just going to spatter my way around the pot. Now this is something that takes a little while because since I don't have anything holding the pot, it's just on the flat surface. So I need to let this part dry before I can spin it around and do the other side. So I do as much as I can going around the pot. And I spin it around, but I'm not spinning it so much that the spatter's actually down on that surface. Just rearrange my little mask here. It's a little bit fiddly, and I've just, gosh, look at that, I've just smudged it all. Be very careful where you hold your pot because I've just smudged my spatter there with my hands. So go around, and once I finish this bit here, I'll leave it dry, then I'll come back, spin the whole thing around and do the other side. This is how the finished spatter looks. So some of it has come onto the lower part, which is what I wanted. And one last thing I want to add is I want to add a scripture verse around the rim of the pot. Of course, it does not have to be a scripture verse. You could add anything you want. You might not want to add anything at all. I am going to write the kind of the theme for not this particular event, A Simple Life, but for Desert Take 2, which has recently just ended, both in my Facebook group and on Patreon. And that verse is Luke 5:16. He withdrew to the wilderness and prayed. And I think that is kind of really appropriate for not only going on the pot that is going to be my little prayer space, but also I've painted the pot as a desert. I'm going to put like a little succulent desert plant in it. So it's kind of like my wilderness here in the middle of the city. Sometimes you take what you can get, right? So I'm just going to write that verse around the rim of the pot. And I've ended up with some space because this verse is quite short and I did not do the writing as big as I might have. So I'm just adding some little sort of floral doodles in that space. I could have just left it blank, of course. And I've used a black Posca pen to do the writing, which is an acrylic paint pen. So you want something that is going to be water resistant. It is a pot plant after all. And even though I have sealed it, there is always the possibility that water will come out over the side or something. I was doing these doodles that are meant to be leaves. I don't know if they look like leaves, but that's okay. I'll just leave them as doodles just to fill that space. So that's my pot. He withdrew to the wilderness and prayed. And I'm going to fill it now with some potting mix, put in my little plant and add some rocks around the outside. I won't show you that as part of this video because it's going to be a bit messy and I don't want to take this whole thing outside. But once it's finished, I will show you some pictures of the finished pot plant. Okay, so here is my completed pot. It's only a baby plant that I've put in there for now, but it will grow a bit over time. Not too much, I'll make sure that it stays small and reasonable. So it's inside my pot. I know it's quite an ugly sort of little thing that I've got it sitting on at the moment, but I've just watered it. There's a bit of water coming out the bottom. I will eventually find something nicer to put underneath. I might end up getting the accompanying terracotta saucer that goes under the pot and maybe paint the edge of that. I'm not sure. I'll see what yeah, I'll see what time and inspiration bring me. So that's my little pot plant in my prayer corner. I don't usually bring people in here, so you're kind of all very special to be brought into this space. So I think I'll keep it here. It's actually quite close to a window. Probably can't see. There we go. There's a window. The curtain's closed, but so I'll be able to open that curtain, give it some light. Crash. And yeah, so here we go. My little prayer corner with my little pot plant. And if you decide to make one yourself, paint a pot with whatever you would like or suits your special little space where you're going to be putting it, and then plant something really special inside it. If you don't have rocks to put on the top, don't worry, that's okay. I'm just really blessed that somebody in my parish donated a big bag of little rocks for our art group, so I've sort of brought some of them home for my pot. Shout out to Silva if you ever watch this, thank you so much. And yeah, so if you make one of these, please do share it. There is an album both in my Facebook group God's Refrigerator as well as my patrons only group George's Bible Patrons, and if you share it onto your media pages, please tag me George's Bible so that I can come over and have a look. So can't wait to see what you create and how your pots end up looking. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.